Welcome to Your Place on the River, a podcast brought to you by Carriage Key of Woodstock, Georgia, in partnership with Chattahoochee Nature Center. Our mission is to connect people with nature. As a private nonprofit 501c3 organization, CNC thrives thanks to support of our members, the community, and listeners like you. Discover more about Chattahoochee Nature Center at chatnaturecenter.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast. Tweet us at CNC Nature using the hashtag YPOTR. And here's your host, Melissa Carter.
I want you to look back on your life and think about the first time that you learned about nature. Was it on a walk with your parents, gluing fall leaves to construction paper in preschool, or simply sitting on the porch with your dog? Well, regardless, it usually happens when we're quite young, and the Chattahoochee Nature Center wants to make sure that connection takes hold for a lifetime. Someone helping in that effort is Alina Ruiz, who is a naturalist at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. But exactly what is a naturalist?
Well, I guess the best way for me to describe a naturalist would be somebody who connects people with nature.
Okay.
And if maybe if they're not familiar with nature, or it's their first time, or they've been going in nature for a long time, it's just a way to build just a bridge of knowledge and appreciation and love for nature so that we can, hopefully preserve as much as we can for future generations. So naturalist, I guess, is just like a bridge, a pathway to the public or, people visiting the nature center who want to get to know more about it. There's just so much that we can do. And they give us so many different outlets and resources and biofacts. So we have so many things that we can use to teach them. So it's a really awesome place to work and just to hang out.
Well, now I know that, a lot of people who love nature probably consider themselves naturalists. But like you said, there's the extra element of education and teaching. And so there has to be a moment in your life where not only did you realize, hey, I love nature, I love being out in nature, I love knowing about nature, but there's this extra incentive for you to talk to other people about it, to introduce other people to the beauties of nature. So explain how it is that you decided you wanted to be a naturalist.
Oh, wow. I guess ever since I was little, I just loved animals and loved outdoors and naturey stuff. I guess I would always watch the Jack Hanna shows and any kind of National Geographic or just watching animals in their natural habitat. I just thought that was fascinating. And it's just so easy to get lost in all of that because it's something, I guess, in these, past few generations that we've become more indoors.
Yeah.
And, maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people were probably outdoors a lot more because now it's just too comfortable to be inside. So we just stay inside a lot. So I grew up in the 80s and we were outside all the time. And there really wasn't a lot of other options. We didn't have tablets and we did have video games. Yeah. But, they can only take you so far. But nature is just endless. There's just so many things to discover or explore or to build. I would always collect rocks or sticks or, just your imagination can run wild out there. And for a kid, it was like a wonderland being outside. I love nature.
Well, I can share this with you because I'm not going to seem weird because of it, but I loved rocks too when I was a kid. And I also grew up in a time where when the street lights came on is when you come home. Otherwise, you're outside. My mother, unfortunately, my father smoked back then. And so he had cigar boxes and she kept all my rocks that I had collected as a kid in a cigar box. And when I left home, she had just, like most parents, she just got a big old tub, put all the stuff in it, said, this is yours. You decide what you want to keep, what you want to throw away. I'm not making that decision.
Yeah.
All the school stuff. And in it was the cigar box with the rocks. Well, fast forward to my son. And when he was young, he really loved collecting rocks. So I have in my collection, my box of rocks and a box of rocks of his. And so I thought, well, I got to do something with this, two rocks. Piles, maybe it's a furniture top, or maybe it's I don't know what to do with it. But Alina, I have those boxes.
But you want to keep it because it means something to you, even though to somebody else it could just be a box of rocks, Well, and
the other thing too is now that I think about it, when you're talking about nature, I mean, I grew up in Middle Tennessee, so I have these rocks that are natural to that area. And then he grew up in the Metro Atlanta area, so he has rocks from a completely different part of the country. So anyway, if there's a geologist that I could get with, we could talk about what to do about these rocks. But anyway, I wonder how, when you're a kid, and you're outside. And like you said, we really have gotten to be indoors most of the time. How do you get to the Chattahoochee Nature Center? What trail do you follow to get from being a kid and now being a naturalist with, with the center?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, well, originally when I was really little, I wanted to be a veterinarian, which a lot of kids want to be because, it just sounds so glamorous and exciting. And then I went to the University of Georgia. I was pre-vet. And I realized, like, I don't know if I want to be indoors with sick animals. It just, when I started like putting myself in that position and kind of observing what they did, it wasn't as glamorous as I thought it was going to be.
It's not sitting, crisscross applesauce with a pet in your lap all day, getting to pet them.
I know, and just letting them lick you. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's a lot more demanding than that, and it's emotional as well because you're having to work with the families and stuff like that. So, I did think that would have been good for me, but I just felt like I would eventually feel like I was confined, So being outside, I found wildlife biology, which is like down the street at the University of Georgia. The vet school is right down the street from the wildlife department. Or I guess it's the forestry, natural resources department. And I kind of found that place and I said, well, this is a perfect medium of kind of like, I want to work with animals. I want to help nature and the environment, but I also get to be outdoors as my office, So yeah. I pursued a bachelor's and a master's. I got my master's degree in 2007. I think it was emphasis in herpetology. So it was a forestry degree, but the emphasis was herpetology. So I did research on frogs.
Okay.
And that was fun and exciting. I get to be in the pond and collect all the tadpoles and then there's the lab research and then, writing the thesis was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding because I got to like have something to show for all of the studies that I did. And it was a really good experience for me because I felt like I was contributing to the literature. I found some abnormalities in frogs that had not been discovered before. So I was
nice.
I was like, this is so cool. I was like, I just felt so grateful that it just fell into my lap. I just found some tadpoles that happened to be very interesting to a lot of professors and the pathologists. So I did that for a little while and I worked at Stone Mountain as a naturalist first. So that was about 15 years ago that I worked as a naturalist for the first time. And I loved that too. That was with kids. It was basically the same thing I do at CNC, teaching the kids, taking them out on the mountain, showing them the plants, the animals, the rocks, lots of rock geology stuff at the mountain.
I've got my rock. Hey, if you need any extra rocks, I got some rocks now.
We had so many rocks and they were very heavy. All the boxes were so heavy. But that was really fun to do for a little while. And over time, when I started working with these kids, I realized, some of them aren't really as excited about nature as I am. And like, what's going on where there's a disconnect where they aren't as attached or they aren't feeling the joy from nature that I always feel when I go out there. And then I realized like these kids, like they're coming from homes that maybe aren't as nurturing or they don't have the same like things that we do at home. So I started to talk to my parents about it. And I just kind of said, I was more worried about the kids than like my job.
Yeah. Well, not to jump in, but I think also, and we've talked about this in other podcast episodes as well, is the education from the parents, because a child, that's your introduction to the world is through your parents or whoever raises you, right?
Yes.
Because everybody's raised by their parents. And, if you're not educated that you're connected to what's outside the window, then you may not even pay attention to what's outside the window. Where I know with my son now, look, my sister is the nature lover and the outdoor girl in our family. And I learned a lot from her. And at the same time, one of the things I always was fascinated by as a kid that I've told my son is, hey, just know that, those trees are expelling oxygen and breathing carbon dioxide. And I just still find that so fascinating that we help each other out. Right. I mean, and I told him, I'm like, little things like that where he knows that now. That's part of his knowledge.
Yeah.
But the purpose was, hey, you're connected to that tree. Without that tree, you couldn't survive. And we contribute to that tree survival. So, maybe it's just a lack of, and I think it's generational, right? Because if you don't teach your children, then how are they going to teach their children? And Alina, that's why it's so important for you to teach the children, right? You're changing generations.
Yeah.
I hope you know that.
That's right. And they will pass that down for sure, that love for nature. But I just felt like some of these kids just needed more than what I could give them in that moment. And I just felt like there was a different path that I was being called to. So I became a school counselor. I went back to school and became a school counselor. And I worked in an elementary school as a counselor for about 10 years. And then, I had my child, and that's kind of when I shifted and realized and it was COVID. They kind of forced me into resignation a little bit because they said I needed to come into the office. And I was really more concerned about my pregnancy than my job. And I would never take it back. I feel like I made the right decision 1,000 times over, because now I'm doing what I love again, and I get to work with kids, and I'm back in nature, and I'm getting to be the mom that I want to be. And I feel like I'm more available to him, because a school counselor has a very demanding schedule, and your heart is pulled in so many different directions as a school counselor, because they were like my kids. I felt like I was their second mom. When they would come to school, I was their mom while they were there. And then being a mom myself now, I'm like, wow, those kids, it does take a village to raise a child. Everybody has to put in their part. Every child has different role models in their life, not just their parents. So hopefully that's the case. But being at Stone Mountain, I saw that not a lot of kids had that. They didn't have the same nurturing and loving families. And you could just see there was something else that was blocking their appreciation for nature, because they just were trying to survive. They were just living day to day, just trying to survive. So now I have more tools, I guess, I'm more equipped to handle stuff like that. So when I see that in my programs now, I kind of adjust my programs to kind of meet them where they're at, because all the kids come from all different parts of Atlanta, and they all have different backgrounds we can't teach the same program to every group.
I think everybody can just remember the moment that changed their lives, or at least changed the idea of what they wanted to be when they grew up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm an old lady, so I remember Jessica Savage was a news anchor on, I think she was on NBC back in the 70s. And I just remember thinking, there's something about her and everybody watching her. And again, there weren't many women that were at the anchor back then. And so I just remember she was the catalyst for me going, wait a second, maybe that's what I want to do for a living. Now, I didn't quite do television news, but I did do broadcasting throughout my career. And so the same with your kids. I'm sure that there is somebody in that group that has been exposed to the Chattahoochee Nature Center, has been exposed to you, these programs, this education, and all of a sudden something clicks in them, and they're like, wait a second, maybe I could do that. Maybe maybe I could study trees, or maybe I could study rocks, or maybe I could study frogs, or whatever it is that they're given permit. It's almost like they're given some conscious permission to pursue a dream that they didn't even know they had.
Yeah, they didn't even know that was a possibility, that something they just thought was cool could be a career.
Right. Because, again, I will always, until I'm an old lady, think that is so cool that trees expel oxygen.
And that's just a basic exchange, gas exchange. There's so many fascinating things that happen in nature all the time, constantly. And it's hard to keep up with all of it.
And I think that to be, I don't know, I always, and my family, I was fortunate to be in a family that loved knowledge, just loved education, just loved trivia, just loved to know something.
Yes,
right? They did not, I mean, now that sometimes gets heated tension arguments, sometimes when we're all together about something, if we disagree about, what's going on.
Everybody's right.
But at the same time, it's a good thing that we're all trying and striving to be intelligent.
And debates, yes.
Yeah. And so I think the same with nature. There, for some, I don't know, maybe it's the introduction of nature, like you said, the disconnect from nature. Funny enough, I just finished watching, and this has nothing to do with the Chattahoochee Nature Center, but there was a documentary I saw, and I'm not going to plug it because they're not a sponsor or anything, but it had to do with gut health.
Oh, yeah,
it had to do with microbial gut health, right?
That's a big thing. Yep.
And so, and I, personally, I had struggled with gut issues my whole life. And so I was really interested in this, right? Going back to, I want to know more, know. And it was talking about, I did a study of fecal samples from different parts of the world and what the microbial content in different regions, what they were. And basically your microbial content is developed by exposure to more foods, different types of foods, especially healthy foods. And they found that urban people, goes back to what we were talking about, people not being disconnected from nature, that people who live in urban areas have very low microbial content, and
Yeah.
that people who usually live in, really third world countries, people who have, whether they want to or not, they're in nature more. They're gathering from nature more of their nutrients, right?
Yes.
Sometimes they're having to grow their own food in order to survive, and they have better microbial
That's
content.
right. Yeah. That's why
And
those kids got to play in the dirt and it's got to get
exactly.
exposed to all those microbes. That's part of where we come from,
Exactly. And the other thing
Concrete.
that yes, and the other thing, and one last thing that I wanted to share was that it said that we need to introduce to our bodies at least 20 to 30 different fruits and vegetables per week minimum.
Wow. Wow.
And so I'm like, and so I was making a salad earlier, Lita, and I was like, I think
What
I put
else?
9 fruits and vegetables there. I'm
Well,
like,
that's not going to cut it.
but anyway, point being, you mentioned how if you lived in nature, if we were back to our ancestors, we would be pulling and picking from different areas, and we
So
would
true.
understand our reliance upon nature. So anyway, back to what you do. How do you, talk about how you introduce nature to people? Maybe a story of someone who really just opened up once they understood what's going on outside.
Oh gosh. I guess just like how, like in the beginning, they come and they're just so excited and they're just like bouncing off the rocks and they don't know how to sit still. And they're just so like overwhelmed with like the excitement of this new place that they've like maybe never been to before or remember coming and like remember having fun, how much fun it was. So they're just like kind of a little bit hyper when they get off the bus, because they've been sitting for a while. And so we get them in the line and we kind of like try to calm them down because they're so excited. But we also want to keep that excitement because we're about to go on this amazing adventure together, So I try to make it so it's like, we're going to be doing all these new explorations together and maybe you'll see something that you've never seen before. Because if you've been here before, you've seen a lot of stuff, but there's going to be something else that you're going to see that you missed last time because you're just covered with nature. It's just everywhere. Wow. It's just the environment it just brings you in. It just takes you in. And then it's just like you're in the wonderland, like an enchanted, like we call it that little enchanted wonderland that they do at the nature center every winter. And it's like when they get there, they're really excited. But then when you start to just like teach the program and focus on the topic, they all start to get kind of quiet. Like it's almost like they're just like on the edge of every word that you're saying that, they just are right. They can't wait for you to say something else because you've kind of pulled them into this like new world and they start to appreciate like the quieter we are, the more we're going to notice, like it's not just about being loud and excited like we always are. The kids are always so can't wait to say something, can't wait to go jump on something. And just the way that nature calms them down, it's like magical, like it could be some of the things that I'm saying, some of the things that I'm doing. But I think the way that we've been trained to teach and just like our own personal twists to everything, we just have to keep them guessing like what's going to be next. Because we have these backpacks where we pack them with a bunch of biofacts and they're always trying to look in there to see what's going to be next. It's just that anticipation of what else can I learn out here that I've never seen before that's brand new. Yeah. Yesterday, we caught a salamander because that's like one of my favorite things to do is go take them out, especially in November and April when they start to come up from like hiding, I guess. And I flipped over a rock and there it was. And everybody just got quiet, like even the teachers. And they were just so excited to see this little thing. And they were great because you have to be careful with a little salamander. If he jumps off and then one of them steps on you, it's squished. So I tried to like preface it. We're in their home. We want to be respectful of where we are because we're going into where they live and they don't know what we're going to do here. So they're a little bit worried and scared. So we have to calm our bodies down so that the animal feels calm and safe. And they all just kind of like, it's almost like you don't have to tell them anymore. After a while, they just start to just fall into that same rhythm that nature brings. It's like patience, calmness, appreciation, and just that love just emanates. You can just see that like their little eyes have those little heart shapes.
Yeah, right. Well, I remember growing up having a yard. And as you were speaking, I thought, oh, I remember I would just lay in the yard and look up and stare at the clouds. And I'm like, I can't remember the last time I did that. So now it's my job. Well, my vision was when I'm a old lady, if I have the privilege of living to be an elderly lady, somebody help me to lay down so I can just stare at the sky.
Yeah,
just be a part of Nate. Don't forget to just, if you're not doing anything, why don't just sit and stare at something
Yeah,
outside,
exactly. Like camping, like the TV, the nature's first TV is the fire. You could just stare
Right.
at the fire for hours, and it's
Yes.
like it's so entertaining, and it's just a fire, but there's always something happening in that fire, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, Alina, thank you for what you do. And is that, if someone, first of all, if there is someone who is listening, maybe a teacher, maybe a counselor, maybe somebody who's like, oh, I would love to bring a group of kids to the center, let them know how they can do that. And then, what lesson or what thought do you want people to have about nature that they may not have had before to get them in that direction to kind of be more connected?
Well, so I guess they start by contacting the nature center. They have a website and just find the educational programs. I feel like Rebecca Dolan, I think, is the one that they can call to book a program. And it's probably best to call sooner than later. So
Mhm.
probably at the beginning of the school year, I would guess, once they get their calendar, to figure out which days will be best surrounding their testing times, and just kind of coordinating with all of their teacher grade level. And just to think that this may be their first experience outdoors, because some kids just go straight to school, straight to aftercare, and then straight home for dinner and bed. And they may not get any outdoor time during the week, maybe on the weekend if the weather is nice, or if their parents don't enjoy nature. This could be something that could be a whole new eye-opening experience for them. And because some kids that have come to the nature center have never been on a hike before, and they'll say, "What's hiking?" I had a student say yesterday, "What is hiking?" Like they had
Mm.
never heard of hiking before. And another kid had to explain, well, you go into the forest and you walk around. And it just seemed so simple. And the child was like, oh, okay, let's see what this is all about. And I'm sure it's an experience they'll never forget, especially if it's their first time. And even if it's not, kids we're just innately conditioned to be in nature and just to be a part of nature and to be connected with nature. It's like all of the other programs we do at the Nature Center. There are healing programs where we do forest bathing, and all the research behind what it does to your brain and your electrical energy currents, or your space, and how you can cleanse it with nature. Forest bathing is amazing.
Yeah.
And I plan on doing that one day. But and what was the other question that you asked?
Oh, just what message would you like to give people? What can they think about regarding nature differently than maybe they haven't thought before?
Well, the one thing that I've kind of, like you were researching a little bit about gut biome, I've been doing my own research about the EMF pollution that we're experiencing now, since we've got so much Wi-Fi, and basically any building that you go inside is going to have Wi-Fi in it, or any kind of, electromagnetic current of some sort, with all the cell towers that have been put up. And there's a lot of research saying that nature can kind of counteract that. So it's actually really just good for your health in general to be in nature and maybe be away from some of those Wi-Fi buildings as much as we can, especially as we're still doing more research on what it's doing to children's brains and children's growing bodies, and just how it's affecting their development. So any opportunity that a teacher or a parent or an adult can take a child into an outdoor environment where there is nature is going to help them in so many different ways, just not educationally, but like biologically. It's going to change them and it's going to benefit them. So there's just infinite reasons why the Nature Center is a great place to go on a field trip, because a lot of field trips, are probably indoors, whether it's a museum or going to some place in downtown Atlanta. There are some nature centers in Atlanta that are really awesome, especially the Chattahoochee Nature Center.
Of course, that's where I would send them first. Well, Alina, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you do, how you help children in particular, and thank you for being part of the podcast.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Melissa. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. Bea Hatcher is also a naturalist at the Chattahoochee Nature Center, but says you can be anywhere and absorb the beauty of the outdoors.
So I think when we do our programming here at the Nature Center, our goal is really to remind each other that we have all of these amazing senses and ways that we can connect with nature, and that even when you're not here, or even if you're not in the forest, you can still use those senses to connect with nature.
I love that. And we're going to get back to that too, because that's probably some advice you can give to people who tend to be, sitting indoors all the time. And I think that's a consistent conversation I'm having with everyone at the Nature Center when it comes to people, especially in the Metro Atlanta area. Of course, people outside of Atlanta listen to the podcast, but anybody in an urban area, I think you sit in your car to go to work. You sit in your office, unless you're fortunate enough to work at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. You get in your car to come home. You go to the grocery store inside. So that's how you harvest your vegetables and your fruits, right? And your protein is in an air-conditioned grocery store. And then you get home and then you sit in front of the TV or sit in front of the computer. And so a lot of people's lives have just kind of, I say devolved into that type of routine. And, I'm sure you get this question a lot, especially from kids at the nature center, but why nature? Why is nature important? And what is it about it that would, it sounds boring to me, for a lot of people who may not be, nature lovers. Sounds boring. It's not as exciting as watching whatever it is I'm watching. What do you say to them?
Something I always try to remind all of my groups is that this is what connects all of us because we are nature. We all need water. We all need food. We all need shelter. And the basis of all that is nature. Mm-hmm. Even the clothing that we wear, what you eat, it's all from nature. The heartbeat of the Chattahoochee Nature Center, in my opinion, is the river and our closeness to it. And that is what connects us to the past, the present, and the future. Yeah. And then it also connects us to all of that flora and fauna that it lives around it. No matter my group, I'm always looking to make that connection with them. So even if you go home and you brush your teeth, that water that's coming out of that faucet comes from somewhere. The furniture in your house, where does that come from? Where does your food actually come from? Mm-hmm. And so just seeing the parallels of what animals need and what we need and how that's really what connects us together.
Yeah. Well, I had the privilege of having a dad who had an incredible green thumb. He worked in agriculture his whole life. He was raised on a farm, did business in agriculture, and then had like this massive garden. Now, of course, when you're a kid and your parent has a massive garden, since you're one of the harvesters, you're not very excited by that garden. So it's like, you want me to go out and do what? You want me to pick what? But when I mentioned earlier about go to the grocery store, when I come home and like I'm cutting my vegetables or fruit, it's so funny. It takes me back to that garden, right? There's certain vegetables that just immediately make me think of being a kid there, and digging in the dirt and all those things that some kids don't have the ability to experience while young. And so when you have children come to the nature center, do you find that there's a lot of backgrounds that they're coming from and some that may have never been a part of a garden or been a part of, anything outdoors before?
We do get a variety of students from all sorts of backgrounds. Some are out every day in nature and some it's kind of their first time ever going out on a hike. And so it's really exciting to get those students, especially because it's like, oh, finally you get to experience this. I think that I can speak for a lot of naturalists. Deep down, our goal is to show them what nature can be, but that you have nature wherever you are. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be trees to be nature. It can be the sky. It doesn't have to be a whole forest. It can be one tree. It could be a dandelion that grows on the sidewalk. You could be riding the bus and you could see that one tree every single day. And that's a little connection because you can observe that. So you can observe it through the seasons. So going back to your garden, you may not have loved it, but you know a lot now about all the seasons and how certain times of the year, certain things grow, whereas other times it's a rest time, maybe, especially in the winter. So some of our students come a little bit tentative. They're a little bit worried about what does this mean? And really once you start inviting them to ask questions and get curious about these just little aspects of what they see, you can see their eyes light up. And they're like, okay, this is exciting. I can really you touch and feel and find tangible things here to experience that I can remember and apply to future experiences. Mm-hmm. Again, whether or not it's that tree or that flower or that one thing, bugs, ants in the sidewalk.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say bugs because that's what I was thinking about. Through that experience and having someone there, and my mother also loved nature, having someone there to explain things to you as well. So the two things that I thought about were, one, I felt very guilty about killing any insect in the house. I learned of their connection outside and that they had a certain job to do or a certain purpose, then I still to this day am the one who scoops them up and throws them out the door. I'm not the one that stomps on them. And I try to teach my son not to do the same thing. And then the other thing that came to mind too is, like, for instance, insects like bumblebee came to mind. As a child, I was intimidated by this big furry thing that, I knew was its sole purpose was to come at me and to take me down, and it was hunting me, and then my father's like, no, this is what it does, this is where it's going, and this is what it's interested in, right? So it's basically not interested in you. And so, are there, like, I'm just curious of some of the stories you might come across. Is there anything that you've heard that you're like, I can't believe that that's the perception? Or is there a common belief in something that you're like, no, that's not how things work at all?
Well, yeah, bugs are definitely high on that list.
Yeah.
I mean, they make me nervous too. It's totally fine. So I think that making that relatable is really important for our students, that especially our snakes. A lot of our students meet snakes. It's their first time ever meeting a snake. Everything they've heard is that snake is going to bite them and it wants to come after them. And getting that chance to be up close to them, but also acknowledging that it's okay to be a little concerned. It's okay to have feelings about, or fears even, about what they're experiencing. But we just want to reassure them. I'll have this animal, or I'll show you where it's safe to go on this walk. And we can still experience nature, but you're in a safe way. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with being afraid of these things, but understanding them and learning a little bit more about them, you hope to overcome that fear and make them more comfortable with their experience.
Yeah. Well, Bea, I mentioned the garden, right? And you have chosen to be a naturalist as your profession. And so is there something, a memory that you can think of that was the first to kind of, I don't know, get in your blood about being a naturalist or wanting to work in nature and with nature?
Well, I've loved nature since I was a little girl. My mom was a gardener, and so I definitely remember planting lots of seeds.
And you need to get outside. Yes.
Yeah. And then I have 2 children of my own. And so after spending significant amount of time outside every day, and just seeing what nature can do, I felt like that was my calling at that point. That why wouldn't you want to be outside all the time? I don't know.
Well, even just the smell on your clothes. There's times that, look, I admittedly am someone who is indoors too much and probably does not go outside as much as she needs to. But I do know that after spending a day outside or doing something outside or whatever it is, just the way I smell when I'm back inside, just I can smell outside on my clothes, right? And for some reason that, for me, brings a lot of peace and a sense of satisfaction, right? That, and maybe again, that's internal, where, like you mentioned, we are a part of it. We are nature. And, I think for a lot of people, it's a luxury to be outside, when it's a shame that we're not outside as common practice. Now, I know you are, but, you mentioned about people being able to kind of connect with nature, even if it's not on a big scale, like a hike or going camping or anything like that. So let's say somebody lives in an urban area, in an apartment or a townhome, doesn't really have a yard. What can they do to really just be connected?
So my students that are coming to me from urban areas specifically, we generally start by meeting an animal and kind of getting the feeling of what nature could be. Naturalists have the privilege of showing all of these animals that this wildlife department works so hard to rehabilitate. And we also get to show off all of these amazing gardens that our horticulture department cultivates and works on every single day. And so we have some really amazing spots, and I would describe as very charismatic places and animals that they can be introduced to. And we go slow. We don't have to be in a rush to deep dive into going on the trail necessarily. Step by step, getting you towards the woods and getting more comfortable with that. Atlanta is the city within a forest, so there's nature everywhere, even going down the interstate. And I'm always reminded too about our Star Lab programs that we offer. The sky is something that we all have in common. Birds are something that we always see. no matter where you are in the city or in the nature center, for example. Having been someone that has lived in a city, in an extremely urban area, I could find nature just in the cracks of sidewalks. There are city parks, if you're lucky enough to be close to one of those. But even just watching from the school bus every single day, that's usually where I think a good place to start is. Or just watching for a bird. What color is it? Why is it here? What's it doing? And just really asking questions about what you're noticing day to day. That's what I start with, is thinking about the sky, night sky, daytime, the clouds, the birds, and then just those little pockets that we can spot. Maybe it's not in your own yard, but it could be on your way to somewhere else.
I love it. I mean, just stay curious is what I'm hearing about,
pretty much.
Right?
Yes. Curiosity is like my big driver personally. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Bea, before we go, let me ask, you mentioned working with students. Is it just school groups, or if someone's listening that, counsels a different type of group or maybe a club of some kind, who is able to come? And is it just kids? Can adults bring a group together and come to the Nature Center?
So naturalists serve pretty much all aspects of our community. So we have schools, community events that you'll have naturalists for, scouting events, all sorts of those on the weekends. And then we also do outreaches. So we go all over the place, to be honest. Just the other day, I took an owl to a fall festival. And there are people of all ages. And I think everyone loves just different aspects of nature, and they're always wanting, especially the animals, they're always interested in learning more about their animals that they see in their backyard. And everyone has a question, or a story, I should say. I've got this owl that lives in my backyard.
But look, Bea, let me just tell you, I remember as a teenager, not that you asked for this story, but it's like you said. I mean, I was a teenager and I was driving home. It was during the summer, and I had a summer job. And this particular summer job, we had to do like inventory. So I'm coming home like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, right? And I just remember going down my street, and all of a sudden this owl with full wingspan, whoosh, right over my windshield, and flying by. And I remember being terrified because I didn't expect it, and then just enchanted at the very same time, because it was just like, whoa, when do you get to see an owl like fly in the middle of the night? It was just really awesome. So, I think you're right. Everybody's got a story.
Yeah. And the other thing I really love to emphasize beyond just animals, I mean, the Nature Center itself and all the different plants that we offer, whether it's the wetlands and some of these endangered species of plants, or maybe it's just the combination of fall and that pop of gold and that purple that happens. It's just incredible to see that. It's a wonderful place for anyone. If you're an artist, if you are just wanting to learn about birds, if you're into insects, I mean, it's all there.
I love it. Well, Bea, thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to having people who listen to the podcast go ahead and call the Nature Center and set up that, I was going to say set up an appointment like we're going to a doctor, but set up that time where they can come with their group and get to meet you and get to learn from you. Thank you again for what you do.
Thank you.